Kristyn Green.
Dillon Garland.
Let's talk about The Last Divide.
The third one.
Yes, the third one.
The third episode.
That's what it's called. Chapter 3, the third one.
The third one. Sorry. I really like this episode though, Dillon, because I feel like it is such a trajectory for the series. Like, this is when stuff starts to pick up.
It really turns.
Just in case, let's do a really quick recap.
Of episode 2?
Of episode 2.
Let's do it. Chloe left the family home, and she immediately regretted it.
Hated it.
She ran out of food, ran out of water, met a guy named Luke. Luke told her that she should go to this old watering hole, which ended up being like a very Western-style barn. A bar fight ensues, chaos.
I was there.
You were there. You were the bar owner, Kitty T.
You were there.
I was there. I was one of the guys getting my butt kicked by Colin, which, fair, it would happen in real life too. And then Chloe escapes after meeting her new friend, Allie. And then Hanlon and Ryan end up at the bar a little later, and they see the chaos. Hanlon's not happy about it, and then Ryan may or may not have shot Allie, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. But at the very end of it, Chloe and Luke are walking off into the woods together and heading to wherever they need to go.
But also, Ryan finally gets confirmation that Chloe
is the one she's after.
Is the one.
The young sister that she is always thinking about and has revenge on her mind all about. Now she has confirmation 5 years after seeing her that, nope, that is who is doing this.
And so that kind of, I want to say, hunt begins.
It does begin. We open on one hell of a speech from Hanlon, which I love, just prepping the troops, if you will, with everything that's going on. And what I love about this too is that, you know, the audience knows that Hanlon's on the hunt. The characters in Hanlon's group know that they're hunting for this girl. But then we cut to Chloe, and she's kind of carefree because she's like, okay, you know what, maybe this will work out. Yes, yesterday was really rough, but now we're on the right path. I've met this friend who's very friendly and helpful, and we're all kind of trying to find a group. So maybe this will work out. Little does she know that she has the target of some really violent men, and worse so, her sister, who has a revenge on her mind. So yeah, the hunt began. One of the cool things too is that that shot where you see that she's kind of smiling and walking away, that was her very first shot of the entire series. That was like the true return to the world of The Last Divide.
We're back in it. And speaking of back in it, in this episode, I think there's a little tease to an old character.
Yes. I'll just say it out loud, because I mean, you guys have seen the I would hope you've seen the episode so far. Yeah, it's for 3 episodes in a row, Chloe has mentioned Sarah in a way. And she says Luke reminds her of her old friend Kelsey, which is a bit of a slip up because she didn't tell Luke her real name. So now they're both named Kelsey, and she kind of has to play dumb, which Phoebe's really good at playing like bad actor. You know what I mean? Like, she can't act bad, but she can play bad actor perfectly. But yeah, it's the tease. It's a little bit of a taste of like, hey, this fun character, this friend that I know, teasing a little bit to what is going to come in the final act of this episode. Yes.
Very exciting. In this episode, there's this scene where Ryan kind of like reluctantly opens up to John.
Yeah. We shot this at the Easterbrook Community Center, just outside of Halifax, and they were amazing. Like, they gave us full reign. Like, we're so accommodating. But it's funny too, because it was also one of those locations where like we shot a lot in the forest and woods, which is like, how much can you light a forest? Like, we can light a little bit, but there's not much we can really do. This was our first location where like we fully had like what I would call a actual film setup, and I remember kind of geeking out, being like, man, 8-year-old me would be crapping himself right now, just walking in and being like, oh, there's huge lights, there's like a huge blackout and everything. It was cool to see. That whole thing. But yeah, no, she opens up, because at this point, like, we really hadn't heard much from Ryan. I think we heard like, you know, a little bit of a conversation with Hanlon in episode 1. She barely speaks in episode 2. In this one, it's the first time she kind of lets people in on who she is and her past, but she does it in a threatening way, because John reveals that he is an absolute piece of beep as a human, with just no morals. He feels like, oh, we've moved on from this. I can't dwell on the past. Screw it. But also, he has a very violent and unfortunate past in the way he treated people. Ryan ain't having any of it. And me and Holly were talking a lot when she first read the script, and we were talking about, we can't wait to get to that scene, because the moment where she says, you know, I put those who caused this in the dirt.
And I'm not quite sure I'm done with that yet.
that moment, it's like, oh, man. But she doesn't have control very long, because then, again, the shadow of Hanlon is immediately over her. And I think when you see the look of complete like anger and I'm gonna rip your head off to John, and that second of Hanlon's hand going on her shoulder, and she just melts because she doesn't know how to react. She doesn't know what's going on. It shows that already Hanlon kind of has this weird control that I don't think she realizes is already there yet. So it's a very telling scene because there's so much going on. We reveal what happened, like Ryan killed the mother and father, and now John knows, and he's kind of scared of that. But it's also a moment to show that, like, despite how much control she thinks she's had, even in just a 2-day period, she's almost lost control of like her own emotions. And I won't say she's stuck yet, but I think she's starting to feel that I think I may be slightly in trouble if I don't play my cards right. So yeah, it's very revealing for both characters.
Oh yes, you can see that conflict inside of her too.
Big time. Yep. One of the cool things too about that spot is that, you know, Jackson, the art team, did so well. Like whenever we walked into a setup that they had set up, it was like, cool, we can shoot anywhere, because they were very like good about placing certain things, as well as they were good at placing like really gross items when we needed it. Like there was a piece of like a panini or something in there that looks like it was just left outside for maybe 20 years and then brought in. It's like moldy and green and everything. It's just amazing. But they had a really good way of creating this atmosphere, mixing with, you know, a DOP and lighting team, combining those together, that this location looks beautiful, and it looks so cool, and it looks like vastly different from the forest, which obviously we're bouncing back and forth between Chloe and Ryan's story. But the art team nailed it, and the camera team nailed it. Just all the fog and the lighting and everything. It's just like, it was one of my favorite locations. It just worked like so well.
Speaking of the lighting, there is actually in this scene is one of my favorite lighting setups of the entire series. And it is with Hanlon, and he has this like shadow cast over him.
Right.
And it shows, it's incredible. Like when you're watching it, you're like, oh, it's so ominous. And like, it's one of my favorite lighting
It's
setups.
showing his kind of two sides in a way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and how he's like really nice and calm and collected, like when you're speaking to him, but then you know that inside there's this like, he's a
Darkness, a
dark,
deep
sinister,
darkness. Yeah.
sinister man. What I love about this episode, Dillon, is that we finally hear a little bit about what actually happened to the world.
Yes.
To make it end.
Yeah.
And so obviously that was something that you wrote and you thought of. Like how did you come up with that?
It's funny because it's both funny and sad. When I wrote the movie, I had a pretty good idea of sort of like, okay, this is how the world ended. Like it was very much what we kind of talk about in the show. Society hit a brink where they just couldn't take it anymore, and then things got violent, and then people at the top thought they could handle it, they couldn't, and then it just kind of like fell apart from there. As I was writing this in the movie, I couldn't keep up with real world events. Like real world was getting more out of hand than what we were doing. So once I kind of accepted the fact that, you know what, I can't chase reality, I need to figure out what makes sense for this world, it's when I came up with sort of exactly what happens, and that monologue that Chloe gives like really just runs it down. Like people were tired of being taken advantage of, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like we're tired of being beaten down, we're tired of being told we're wrong, we're tired of being told to move on from all these things. Like no, we want a better life, and this is ridiculous that we can't do that. The problem and what caused the world to end within the last divide is that those at the top just took advantage of it, and they're the ones that started like, you know, throwing gas on the fire to let chaos reign, to think that they could benefit from the chaos and make money off the chaos and just like be in a better spot because of it, without realizing that no, when an entire group is gonna fight, like they're gonna tear you down. And the bad guys won in the end because the loudest and the more aggressive and violent and the ill-mannered people ended up being the ones on top, and that's why the cities are destroyed, and now all the good people are kind of pushed to the outskirts of the city. You know, it was something that I thought about for a long time because I wanted to make sure that, you know, if we got to the point of having to explain it, because I think for the longest time I didn't want to. I just kind of want to leave it ambiguous, but I think Nick's acting and Luke's character kind of lends itself to like, you know what, he could be the one that's kind of ignorant to what actually happened, and he just so go with the flow kind of guy, where it's a good segue to get into a conversation like, so what actually happened? And then obviously Chloe knows because she's the most mature one in the room. But it took a while to get there, like to really figure it out. And I think it took that removal of reality and focus solely on the world of the Last Divide to get there, but I think it works.
Another scene in this episode, which is very unnerving, I have to say, is when Hanlon and Ryan finally have a conversation, just the two of them.
Yeah.
And Hanlon's demeanor is so much different when it's just the two of them.
Yep.
What's that about?
Great question. I think there's, without spoiling much, I think there's a lot to Hanlon that we don't see. I think he is very much playing a sort of character and playing whoever is in the room in a little bit, right? I think he's tired of John's attitude. That's why he's kind of so hard on John, and now that he's kind of found, in a sense, a new toy to play with, like now he's focused on that. It's like, oh, younger child, right? Like now I'm gonna focus on a new kid. Nye has an incredible act for subtlety, because you can tell he'll move like a muscle in his eye, and you'll see that the impatience is showing. Hanlon's starting to get a little pissed off, and he's cracking. Is he going to snap? Who knows? I think that's what works so well with him, because you don't know what's going to happen. He could walk over and crack her neck, like we don't know what he's going to do. But in this instance, he is very like calm, and he's trying to be one-on-one with Ryan and just like, you know, hey, you and I, we can make this work. Like I know it's hard, whatever. One thing I like too, so this is a bit of a happy accident, but it works so well, is that the way that they're seated kind of shows the dynamic between them too. Because Ryan is sitting on a chair that's lower, and Hanlon ends up sitting on a stool that raises him higher. So you already have him in sort of like, he's higher than her, and he's showing that in a physical way. He's showing like, you know, yeah, we're on the same page, but I'm up here, so just know that's not gonna change. Yeah, it's incredible. Like Nye's ability to just like really show who Hanlon is, which you'll find out later, in the subtlest ways, I think builds up the tension, because I think you have those moments when you're watching like, he's evil, but wait, no he isn't, because you kind of buy into his spiel. Like, I want to join the group now. He sounds like pretty cool, but really there's something very dark underneath all of that.
Which is even more scary about him is that he's charismatic.
He is. He's charming.
He's so charming.
Yep.
The chase in between Kieran, Declan, Chloe,
Luke. Yeah.
Going to the like coolest location.
It is. Originally this scene was going to be in like a junkyard. She was going to be kind of weaving in between old cars, hiding from Kieran. But the original location I wanted to shoot, because we were going to film at Barrington, but COVID kind of like stopped that from happening. But we switched it to the tunnels, because I thought like, man, what would be really cool? And I had shot at York Redoubt before, and I knew that they were really cool spots. So we went there, and it worked out so beautifully. Like, it became a horror film almost immediately, because once we got there, we realized like, okay, one, this is cool. Two, we can do so much with this. And three, it kind of gives us a chance to do a one take, which we had wanted to do. But it's one of the coolest locations, because once you get in there, it's like, it's straight horror. Like, you don't want to be cornered in this place ever, let alone by Kieran, who was in like full-blown The Shining mode, like going nuts. He's about to axe down a door and say like, here's Rory. Like, it's creepy as hell.
It's disgusting. And that monologue you used for the trailer.
I did. It was the first voice anybody ever heard from the show was Rory's, because it's so good. It's like so creepy.
It's so unnerving to listen to.
It's amazing. I really like this part too, because the script kind of evolved once we made the decision to move to not going to Barrington, unfortunately. I wanted to really bad, but we couldn't make it work. But one of the things that never existed was that Hanlon Kane did this run sign. It never existed in the original script, but because we switched up the location, I was able to add something that I think made it more apparent that something is wrong and Hanlon Kane is a bad guy to the audience, but it's also the first time Chloe is ever seeing that name, ever. And as we get going, it's going to become a name that absolutely makes her life a whole nightmare. But it was cool because we got so much done in that where, you know, we've had the kind of dramatic one location episode, we had the Western bar fight, and now we're kind of shifting into thriller horror a little bit. So we're creating a new type of genre almost each time when we make these shows, or make these episodes. And that was cool because if any other location, I don't think it would have worked. That location and Parks Canada being so giving and helpful with it, like allowed us to do something really cool. And I think it turns out so well.
Oh, so well.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's one of those sets too that when people watch it, they're gonna be like, where is this?
Yeah, and you can go there.
And
it's really
you
cool.
can
Yeah.
go. Like I think people have no idea that's just like in our backyard at York Redoubt. Like we're so blessed. We're so lucky to have it.
We got lucky.
So then the chase though finally ends
Yes.
with Chloe getting captured.
Yes. Poor Chloe.
Could not run fast enough.
Well, she put up a fight, but she got cornered by the two, and then Declan is the type that will punch a child because he's an a-hole. But yeah, she gets caught, and then we go to a location that I think works perfectly for the character we're about to reintroduce to the world. Because originally, the script change is like where they were going to go once Chloe got cornered and captured was they were going to go to a campground, just like a campground with like a cottage here, a cottage there. But again, when we shifted from Barrington when we shifted to not go to Barrington, we looked at it and said like, well, what is around that we can do? And I think you and I first talked about it in a hotel room during like a location scout, being like, well, what about the drive-in theater? And we're like, no, they won't go for that. And thankfully, the Valley Drive-In Theater was like, yeah, go ahead. And we managed to get like the coolest introduction location possible for Sarah.
It was fascinating that
Yeah.
we got that. Like, and you're right, so fitting because Sarah is such a theatrical character. She's the movie character, and so we literally see her for the very first time.
It basically at a movie theater.
At a movie
actually,
theater.
Not basically, actually at a movie theater.
Actually,
Yeah.
at a movie theater, which is funny. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dillon, but I think that scene was the first that you wrote.
For the sequel, yeah. Like the original idea when I had the movie idea, it was different how we were going to introduce Sarah. But when I started writing it for the television series, the first idea I had, because I very much love the character of Sarah, and we only get to meet Sarah in the movie at the end, because we only know Kelsey throughout, and then she finally reveals it. So we don't really ever have time to meet Sarah. So when I was writing, I was like, well, how do I reintroduce her in a really fun way? And when I started writing, I'm like, well, what if Chloe's cornered, and then it just so happens that, like, okay, who's that running? Path throws her by, we can't see her, she's blindfolded and all that stuff. So it was the very first thing I ever wrote for that was Sarah's thing. I even have music picked out, like trailer music picked out that I used to like envision in my head. And it was a moment that I was like, man, I think that one's gonna get me so much on set because it's been in my mind forever. And then seeing it, and like when the camera comes down and then like slowly, and then you just see going, it was exactly what I wanted, like down to the T. And it was just an incredible thing. It's like most things you conceptualize end up being either lesser than or maybe hitting under par for like, you know, what you want. This was one of those things where I was like, no, this actually worked really well. And it was a perfect reintroduction to a character that is so out there and so quirky, and yeah, it just made sense.
It just made sense. It
Yep.
was like, and so unique, so unique.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else is gonna have that
God, no.
in there.
Better not.
They better
No
not.
one's ever allowed to shoot at the drive-in ever again.
Never again. We're cutting it off. We're completely cutting it off. So, like as you're saying, we get reintroduced to Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Where's she been? What's she been up to?
It's a good question. Probably for the next episode. We'll talk about the next episode. You know, it's we originally we were going to introduce Sarah earlier. We were going to show her in a scene in episode 1, but the scene itself as I started talking to Tia more and more and kind of diving into the character, we realized that, you know, if we introduced that character early in the way that we wanted to, she was going to be part of a group and then she was going to leave because she wanted to find like her friends or family or whatever. But we thought that, well, if she has this group to go back to, then the stakes for her are kind of lesser than, like, because if it doesn't work out with Chloe, if it doesn't work out with, you know, her family, then she can just go back to this group. She's got a place to go. And it's like, I don't know if that works, because then, like, what is she fighting for? So that's why we wanted to introduce her in a way where it's like, okay, no, she's got nothing to go back to. She's a loner, she's just traveling and all that. So having her back in this way, like, feels a lot, like, more important, because she's also talked about nonstop leading up to this point. Episode 1, Chloe mentions Sarah to her mother. Episode 2, she mentions Kelsey to Allie. And then episode 3, in the beginning, she mentions Kelsey to Luke. So it's always this kind of like, who the hell is the Sarah person, the Kelsey person, when are we gonna meet her? Well, now, we're gonna meet her now, and she's gonna whoop some butt. My favorite moment in this entire fight, which is a hoot, to put it lightly, there's one last punch before they leave where Rory's kind of like, he's stumbling around, it's like, oh, he's completely out of it. And Sarah goes, oh, it's all yours. Thinking that Chloe's gonna hit him with the bat, but she throws it in her other hand and gives the most Indiana Jones Harrison Ford punch I think anybody not named Harrison Ford could throw. It's a perfect moment, and Rory sells it so well. Like, he sells it like a rhino just ran into his face. No, but it was so cool, and to have a location like that too, I think just ups the entire production, because one, it's a place that people recognize, so they know where it is, so they can more easily say, like, yeah, this is a Nova Scotian story, because here is a Nova Scotian staple, being the Valley Drive-In. But to also have it be married with the story and make sense. Like, it wasn't just a location where it's like, oh, it's cool, let's shoot there. It was, no, it's cool because our character is so off the silver screen type of character. And it worked beautifully, I think.
And so, Dillon, like, any overall notes, thoughts, feelings, opinions about this episode? I'm
really happy about it because it really is, it's a slower paced episode in the beginning because we're getting so many bits of story and stuff like that, but I love it because it really, you know, we just had the action-packed episode 2. Now we can slow down a little bit and say, like, okay, here's some more information about the world, as well as we get to reintroduce one of my favorite characters I've ever sort of had a hand in creating. So being able to kind of see that work out and to have it work out as well as it did and not be disappointed, like, oh man, this isn't what I wrote. I kind of was like, no, it's better than what I wrote because of the team we had. Seeing that all come together and, like, really knowing, like, okay, now we're off to the races. Now the main characters are back together between Sarah and Chloe. Now we can have some real fun. It's like, yeah, it's exciting. At least fun for a little while. We'll get into that next episode. But
yeah, we'll get into that next episode. But you're right. Learned a lot more about the world, more about like how it ended. I love that conversation. Again, the writing of that monologue, Chloe's monologue, so well done. Hanlon's getting grosser. Hanlon's getting a lot grosser, and I don't love it. I don't love it.
It doesn't get worse, I don't think.
I don't.
Maybe not. We'll see.
We'll see, I guess. Wow, what a great, like, literally the perfect location to introduce, to reintroduce Sarah,
yeah.
who's back and pinker than ever.
Pinker than ever, yeah. That's her tagline. That's good.
That's her tagline. No, it was great. So let's watch the next one.
Okay.
So, you ready for a story?